The cowboy left at dawn, heading deep into the wild to hunt for meat, nothing more. But when he returned, something was different. Something no one in the town could explain. Beside him stood a mysterious Apache woman, silent, watching, as if she had always belonged with him. No one knew where she came from, or what danger she might bring with her. And that was just the beginning. The morning air was cold and still when the cowboy left the small frontier town. The sky was pale, and the first light of day stretched slowly over the dry land. Dust clung to the wooden houses behind him as if the town itself was trying to hold him back. He did not look back. He rarely did. His name was Ethan Cole, though most people in town simply called him the Hunter. He lived on the edge of the settlement, away from noise and company. He spoke only when necessary, and even then his words were short. People respected his skill with a rifle, but they never truly knew him. That morning, he rode alone into the wide open land beyond the river ridge. The town needed food, and game had become scarce. Ethan had agreed to hunt because no one else could survive that far out for long. He carried only what he needed, his rifle, a knife, and a small pack of supplies. As his horse moved deeper into the wild, the land changed. The grass grew thinner, replaced by rock and dry soil. The wind passed through narrow canyons and carried strange echoes. The world behind him faded until there was nothing but silence. Ethan slowed his horse near a dry stream bed. He noticed fresh tracks pressed into the dirt. Deer. Not far ahead. He knelt beside them, studying the direction. The marks were recent, which meant the animals were still close. He tightened his grip on the reins and followed. The canyon walls rose higher as he moved forward, cutting off the sky in narrow strips. The sound of his horse's steps became softer, almost swallowed by the land. Even the usual signs of life felt absent. No birds called out. No small animals moved in the brush. Ethan paused again. Something about the silence felt unusual. It was not the normal quiet of the wild. It felt heavier, like the land was holding its breath. He scanned the rocks above him and the narrow paths ahead. Nothing moved. Still, he did not relax. Out here, silence often meant that something was watching. He continued forward, unaware that his search for food was leading him toward something far more dangerous than hunger. By midday, Ethan still had not found his prey. The deer tracks he had been following began to fade near a rocky bend in the canyon. The air felt warmer here, trapped between stone walls that rose on both sides. His horse shifted uneasily, sensing something that Ethan could not yet see. He stopped and looked around again. The silence had changed. It was no longer empty. It felt controlled, as if the land itself was hiding movement just beyond his sight. Then he noticed something unusual. On a ledge above the canyon floor, a figure stood still against the stone. Ethan reached slowly for his rifle, but did not raise it. From a distance, it looked like a woman. She wore clothing that did not belong to settlers. Her hair fell long and dark, moving slightly with the wind. She did not hide when she saw him. She did not run. Instead, she stepped forward. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Out here, no one simply appeared alone. Not without reason. He brought his horse to a slow stop and called out, but his voice was not answered. The woman kept watching him, her expression unreadable. There was no fear in her face, only calm focus. She moved down the slope carefully, her steps sure and silent. When she reached the canyon floor, she stopped at a distance that kept space between them. Ethan kept his hand near his rifle. Something about her presence did not match what he expected. She looked like she belonged to the land itself, yet her eyes carried something sharp and alert. Then, in a soft voice, she spoke a single word. "Hungry." Ethan did not respond. He studied her instead, trying to understand why she was here alone, and why she did not seem afraid of him. Before he could decide what to do next, a distant sound broke through the canyon. Voices. Shouting. Horses approaching fast. The woman turned immediately, her calm breaking for the first time. She stepped closer and grabbed Ethan's wrist. Her voice dropped lower. "Run." Ethan did not hesitate after that single word. The sound of approaching horses grew louder, echoing through the narrow canyon like thunder trapped between stone walls. He turned his horse quickly, but the woman was already moving ahead of him, pulling him toward a tighter path between the rocks. He still did not trust her, yet there was no time to question anything. They rode hard through the canyon, the ground rough and uneven beneath them. Stones scattered under the hooves, and dust rose behind them like a trail that could give them away at any moment. Ethan glanced back once. Shadows of riders appeared at the canyon entrance, spreading out as they followed. The woman did not look back. She moved as if she already knew every turn ahead. She led him through a narrow passage that barely allowed the horse to pass. The walls closed in on both sides, forcing them into single file. Ethan had to lean forward to avoid scraping the stone. Behind them, the sound of pursuit echoed louder, but it could not match their pace. After several tense minutes, the canyon opened into a lower valley filled with scattered trees and dry brush. The woman slowed only slightly, then guided him toward a hidden path between thick rocks. It was easy to miss unless someone knew it was there. They slipped through just as the sounds of pursuit began to fade behind them. Ethan finally brought his horse to a stop inside a small, hidden hollow surrounded by stone walls. The only sound now was their heavy breathing and the distant wind. For the first time since the chase began, the woman released her grip on his wrist. Ethan turned to her, his voice sharp. "Who are they?" She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Men who do not leave witnesses." Night settled over the canyon without warning. The last light disappeared quickly, leaving only cold shadows between the rocks. Ethan and the woman stayed hidden in the small hollow, listening to the distant movement of riders searching the land. The silence between them was heavy. Ethan kept his rifle close, watching her carefully. She did not appear nervous. Instead, she sat with a calm stillness, as if she had lived through worse than this before. Hours passed before the riders finally moved away. Only then did she speak again. Her voice was low, controlled, but there was something tired in it. She told him she had once lived with her people deeper in the canyon. A quiet life, far from settlers and conflict. But one night, armed men came. They burned what they could not take and killed anyone who stood in their way. She survived, but everything else was gone. Since then, she had been following the men responsible. Not for safety. Not for escape. For justice. Ethan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked away for a moment, thinking. Then he asked the question that stayed in his mind. "Why bring me into this?" She met his eyes. "Because you would not have survived them alone." A long silence followed. Ethan finally understood that his hunt had never been simple. He had stepped into a story that was already in motion, one that had nothing to do with meat, and everything to do with survival. Dawn came slowly over the canyon, painting the rocks in pale light. The air was still cold, but the silence no longer felt safe. Ethan stood near the edge of the hollow, watching the narrow paths below. He could sense it before he saw it. The riders had returned. This time, they did not come carelessly. They moved with purpose, spreading through the canyon like they already knew where their prey was hiding. Ethan checked his rifle. The woman stood beside him, calm as ever, but her eyes were sharper now. She pointed toward the higher rocks, showing him where the first movement would come from. She knew their patterns. She had studied them for a long time. The first shot broke the morning stillness. Chaos followed quickly. Ethan fired from behind cover, forcing the attackers to split their formation. The woman moved through the rocks with quiet speed, guiding him with short signals and gestures. She led him away from open ground, toward positions where the canyon worked in their favor. The fight did not last long, but it felt endless in the moment. When the last echo of gunfire faded, only wind remained. The canyon was quiet again. Ethan lowered his rifle slowly. He expected her to leave, to disappear into the land as she had appeared. But she did not move. They stood in silence for a moment, both carrying the weight of what had just ended. Then Ethan spoke softly. "What now?" She looked toward the open path beyond the canyon. "Keep walking." The canyon behind them slowly fell into silence, as if nothing had ever happened there. Ethan and the woman stood side by side, looking toward the open land ahead. The past still lingered in the air, but it no longer held them in place. Ethan lowered his rifle and took a slow breath. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel like he was simply surviving. Something had changed without warning, and he could not yet name it. The woman started walking first. After a moment, Ethan followed. Two people from different worlds, moving forward on the same path, not because they planned to, but because the land had pushed them there. And behind them, the canyon stayed silent, keeping its secrets buried in stone. If this story made you feel something, tell me in the comments what you think happens next. Would you trust someone like her after everything that happened, or walk away while you still can? And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and stay with the journey.